Born in Reading, so I'm a southerner. Grew up in Solihull, West Midlands, kind of green belt land. Upbringing was good. It was good. Calm. One brother, one sister. My parents worked for a missions organisation, so I grew up with quite a strong Christian ethos in the household. Lots of discussions, probing discussions. What do you think about kind of discussions? Yeah, it's quite a rich upbringing. Yeah.
And did you enjoy childhood? What were the kind of things you got up to when you were a kid?
Yeah, I did. I've always been a bit of an adrenaline junkie, and I think childhood was similar. It was bikes in the woods. It was playing in the mud. It was experience. It was physical. It was adventure. It was wrestling with my brother. It was yeah, it was good. I liked involved quite a lot with music. Never really sporty as such, but I did like a roll around. But yeah, good, active.
And school? What was school like?
Um, Never particularly liked school. It kind of felt like I was being straitjacketed all the time. Didn't find I made friends, or I didn't feel like I made friends easily. I felt a bit of a kind of an oddity at certainly junior school. And my sister I'm the youngest of three, but my sister, she's the eldest. She used to kind of see me kind of walking around as a first year in secondary school, year 7 for all of you younger ones. And she would just see me wandering around on my own and was like, "Are you all right?" And that was kind of certainly the early part of my schooling. So I found it quite a lonely place, actually. Probably like a lot of people, got a bit picked on. God-bothering family. What's wrong with you, Bible basher? Some of that just by association. I'm glad that I'm not at school anymore, if I can put it that way.
What were the dreams when you were growing up? What were your aspirations?
Okay, yes, great. This is great, isn't it? Because I had no idea we were going down this route, and I wanted to be a TV chef. There's a few people who know this now, possibly a few more. Yeah, I wanted to be a TV chef. So yeah, I love that kind of idea of a little bit of creativity and then latterly, as I got through school, I loved the idea of kind of performing music work. Yeah, I kind of enjoyed that side of it. Played in a couple of jazz and funk bands, brass bands when I was younger, and I quite enjoyed that kind of environment. So yeah, I think probably until I realised those dreams maybe weren't what I was cut out for. They were what I held on to.
So you get to the end of school.
Yeah.
What was next?
Oh wow! Again, $1 million question, because I didn't know. I just didn't know what I was going to do, what I was going to be, and I applied for a few things. I filled in an application for the Royal Marines. I didn't want to go to university. Again, this kind of shackles, this kind of straitjacketed experience didn't sit with me, and I ended up applying and got accepted to work in a paramedic cadet scheme to train to be a full-time paramedic. And just shortly before that was due to start, the government funding was pulled, and I was left probably mid-August with really not a lot to do, not knowing where I wanted to go. And some friends of mine said, maybe consider doing some kind of Christian mission work. And I went into schools evangelism down in South London, working in schools doing youth groups, RE lessons, assemblies, CUs, and it was great, good fun. And I ended up doing that for 2 years. But still kind of not sure where I wanted to be, and ended up starting training as an osteopath in London, which I quit. So I guess in many ways I've got a history of being a little bit of a quitter. Not not really sure where my feet were.
But obviously then you found a career, you
Yeah.
found a niche.
Yeah, which I loved.
What was
Yeah, I maybe it's a bit of a hang-on from my kind of the Royal Marine application I never sent, but I thought maybe I'd do something a little bit militaristic, and I joined the police. Started working in Croydon. Loved it, absolutely loved it. Still up there in kind of my mind as one of the best jobs ever. Enjoyed the camaraderie with colleagues. Loved dealing with victims. Loved dealing with suspects. I loved all of it. It was, yeah, it was great fun, and even kind of had this sense of rightness about it for me. And one of the great things about the police is you can move around, and you don't have to stick in one place. You can be a police officer for years, but have done countless different jobs. So it was great to have somewhere where I had a grounding, but had a flexibility to do various different things. So yeah, I really enjoyed that. 18 years in the police, so yeah.
So you were, while you were in the police, you were a follower of Jesus, Christian. So how was that? What was that like?
Okay, that is a hard question, and because the phrase "follower of Jesus" is quite precise, needingly so. But there were so many areas of my life which I would say were on my terms. Having grown up in the environment I grew up with, I knew the substance of what it meant to follow Jesus. And indeed, I'd made a decision to follow Jesus. But what that meant on the ground was very different from what it meant as a 5-year-old. And I found that there was a tension there in my life, in the police. And I found that quite a challenging world. You know, there's much in the police. I worked in a few roles which are covert by nature. And there is a lie, therefore, by nature. And there were some things I had to kind of reconcile as a follower of Jesus that were uneasy to work through. It's an environment which is not, in any sense, Christian. You're dealing with, as everyone is, we're dealing with broken people, broken colleagues, broken victims, broken suspects, broken me. And that adds a messiness. And I found that very hard to kind of balance that out. How do you spend your time with mess and come out clean the other side was a real kind of perennial question for me. How do you touch dirt and not have dirty hands? So yeah, to answer that briefly, challenging, very challenging.
So just moving along a bit, you're a copper in the Met,
Yeah.
and then you end up as a copper in the North Wales Police.
Yeah.
How did that happen? What's the story there?
Yeah. Okay. We were living, my wife and I and our kids. We were living in Kent, and there were some challenges we were having in the neighbourhood. Normal, nothing particularly grotty, nothing particularly horrible, but challenges with our relationship with neighbours, uncomfortable stuff, coming home and finding my wife upset in tears, and we decided to think about let's move somewhere. We couldn't really afford to move further into London. That would have made my commute better and life in many ways a lot easier, but we couldn't do that. So we looked at moving further out. Of course, you move out, the commute goes up. And we thought, actually, this is ridiculous. If our move is to make some things simpler for us as a family, then if we're going to move 20 miles, 50 miles, why not move 300 miles? And so we looked at where was recruiting transferees from the police. And North Wales was just one of the most viable options. I had to learn a little bit of Welsh, got fairly stuck into that. And in 2014, we took the plunge and moved up from Kent into North Wales to a little village just outside of Conway, north of Snowdonia. All good fun.
And so you carry on being a policeman in a very different context.
Yeah. Yeah.
You drop the slow pace of life in London for the high
the high rollers of North
Yeah.
Wales. Yeah.
Yeah, but life and your history starts to, I guess, starts to affect you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Well, the context was I'd moved up. I'd worked in a covert unit in London. I moved up and ended up working in the rape investigation team in North Wales and then in child protection in North Wales. And we start going to a local church in our village and getting more and more involved. And ultimately I was asked in the December of 2016 if I would consider taking responsibility for the leadership of the church. And that started really a reaction as I had to then consider whether that was something that I thought God wanted me to do. I considered it in those terms. And there was something that was playing on my mind that over that year, following year actually, 2017. And it was an incident that had taken place in London many years before, probably around about 2008, that had just been ticking along in the back of my head. And I was uncomfortable with it. And I felt guilty about it and messy, and it's something I'd not really thought about for quite some time. I'd worked in a busy burglary and robbery investigation team. And there was a situation where I met a young gentleman in the front office of the police station. And a couple of weeks later, I was asked if I would review some CCTV footage from the scene of a burglary, which I did. And I was asked if I recognised the man on the footage. And I thought to myself, no, not really. And then I was asked, well, come on, surely you recognise him. I said, no. He said, it's a guy you saw 2 weeks ago. I said, okay. Would you give us a statement to that effect? And I said, yeah, I will. So I wrote a statement saying I recognise this man. And I knew then, actually, it was on my mind. I remember this vividly. These moments that you have in life, you can't escape them. They're part of who you are. And I remember this, and I remember thinking, this is not right. I was young, I was training as a detective constable, and I had visions of my prowess as a detective, and I know then why. I know what I wanted. And I handed the statement in. There was some other evidence around. It wasn't just me, as it were. And the case goes to court, and my statement as part of my evidence, or part of this case is evidence, and I'm asked by the judge, as in all cases, is your statement correct? I said, yeah, it is. Do you recognise this man on the CCTV footage? Yeah, I do. And so it went on. And the case goes to conviction. He's convicted. And, the mind plays terrible tricks. Let me rephrase that. I played terrible tricks with that. Thinking that it's deserved, it's right, it's noble. But I knew all the way through why I'd lied. And I put it to bed in my mind and didn't think much of it. I couldn't understand how I could be so manipulative and so selfish. How you can make choices like that in nanoseconds. But from a framework of my upbringing, how does that happen? And having to kind of face that ugly reality was too much. And I didn't at all. Until that spring in 2017, when I felt God picking at something in the back of my mind. And it was a kind of a painful realization that there's something I needed to look at. And it would have been around about June that year, end of June that year, 2017, and I resolved that I would do something. I didn't know what, and I prayed, and my prayer was pretty simple. It was, Lord, please deal with this, uncover it, and I will go where you take me on this, but I don't know how to deal with it. I'm ashamed. I remember coming home. I'd been away, and I came home, and must have been that summer. And my dear wife, Lucy, she didn't know where I was. I was upstairs. I'd locked myself in the bathroom, and I was sitting there just trying to compute this weird place I'd been in. And she could hear me sniffling, like I am now, actually. And she said, what are you doing? And she came in, she sat with me. And I told her what had happened all those years before. And I said, I've got to do something. I've got to do something about this. And it's not about payment. It's about doing what's right. It's about this fact there's been a lie. There's been something that can be made right. And with all my understanding of God's love for me, I couldn't just pretend that the truth didn't matter. And it had taken me a few months of kind of working through this process of thinking, what do I need to do? From the beginning of that prayer, Lord, I'll do what you want me to do. I don't want to, but I must. And my want to do what you want me to do is higher than my want to do what I want to do. So it's kind of war in me of what wants are. I'd spoken to people, many Christian, dear brothers, and non-Christians, and people I trusted to give me some good counsel. And a lot of people said, no, don't. You are saved, you are sorted. But I couldn't get past Zacchaeus. I couldn't get past Zacchaeus. This man in a tree who meets Jesus and gives back, not because he wants to gain God's favour, but because he has God's favour. And I couldn't get past that. So as I sat there crying with Lucy, and I suddenly realised this had a lot of cost for her. And I realised then that I stood to lose everything that I held dear. My marriage, my children, my job, the job I loved, and a ministry in a church where I was starting to take some responsibility, and these things kind of grab a hold of you and you think, I don't want to lose these. So I started to write a letter to initially the courts down in South London. I changed it and ended up being to some of the police leadership down there. And I got a couple of folks to just check over what I'd written. and just to pray with me and to work through some of my confusion on this. And I then shelved the letter, and I put it down. I put it in a drawer, filed it in a folder deep into my laptop, and thought, I'll deal with this at some other point. And it was about maybe a year and a half, 2 years later. You know, God doesn't give up. He doesn't give up at all, and it's brilliant. And I thought, I've got to resolve again. And that November, it must have been 2019, actually. 2019. I arranged an appointment with my chief superintendent, fairly high in the police management structure, a good few ranks above me. I was fairly low, the pecking order of police management. And I arranged an appointment, and I got the email back from him at around about 1 in the morning to say, yeah, you'll have an appointment with me tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. So I took the letter and I went and I stood in outside the post box in the rain, holding the letter in the mouth of the letterbox. About 15 minutes. A letter that symbolised for me who I was and who I am. Symbolised failure, but also symbolised marriage, job, mortgage, children, reputation, church, ministry. And just held it there, thinking, do I want to do this? This kind of turmoil in me. And I pretty much decided then I've got this far. And I let it go, and I heard it thump on the pile of letters inside the postbox. I'll come back to that bit in a second, but the next day I went and met with the chief superintendent. He didn't know what it was about. And I started to tell him the story, and then I said, it's probably better if you just read the letter. And I gave him the letter, and he read it. The room was silent for a while. And he said, please, Chris, don't send this letter. And I said, it's too late. I did it last night, after your email. He called me something that wasn't my name. And then told me that he had to question some of his own moral decision-making in his life. And kind of a catalogue of interactions with senior leaders in the police in North Wales after that moment. Chris, have you lost your mind? What have you done that for? Why have you sent that letter? An interesting few days for me. Do you know what you stand to lose? I said, yeah, potentially 10, maybe 14 years of imprisonment. I've lied in court, under oath, and I know I've lied, and I've just given the police all the evidence. You know you'll probably lose your job. I said, I know. Back at that post box, letting go of that envelope was the best thing. It's the best thing. It wasn't just the best thing pragmatically in some kind of the most sensible thing to do. I certainly don't mean it that way, although that is true. I mean, it's the best thing. Because everything that I held dear was in that paper. That's quite a precious moment for me, that. Because you know what matters. And it was like everything went quiet. The noise of the last few years of conscience, of struggle, of thinking, Lord, you've asked me to do something, but I'm not sure I can. The attempts over the previous 10 years of pushing down this gnawing feeling. The living with the hypocrisy that what I say is not what I do or what I am. There's this contradiction there. Living with the contradiction of telling your children that truth matters. Working in an industry which relies on objective truth, something that is real, and you say this person did something, this person didn't do something. The whole fabric of this relies on a concept of truth. When I put that letter in that letterbox, all of that went. And I saw with this kind of clarity who I was. A sinner, I guess, is the way to put it. But that these things have real consequence. Well, over the next few months, I had to wait for the wheels of an investigation to take place, to turn. And it was the summer the following year when I got a call. I should backtrack a little bit, because over those months there was obviously some discussions about my integrity and what that meant for my career in the police, and rightly so. And so I had various degrees of kind of interaction with the managers. Really good interaction, to be honest, but always on the framework of integrity, of right and wrong, morality. And then in the summer that year, I had a phone call. I'd had a few phone calls over the year, and some of them were withheld numbers, and you're always kind of thinking, is this it? Is this the invitation to come in, to have my final interview? And the discussion, the voice on the end of the phone, said the case has been investigated. The Crown Prosecution Service have reviewed all the evidence. And they decided that there can be no case for further action. We can't take this any further. The reasons are pretty standard in some respect, is that they didn't have enough evidence to prosecute. That the impact of my evidence may or may not have, it seems like may not have had much impact in the evidence anyway, in terms of the case and this gentleman who'd been convicted. But there was a problem that they couldn't really resolve, because the evidence that they rely upon about a lie has come from a liar. So it's hard to trust evidence from a liar. But the nature of the evidence is about truth, thus showing that the liar is telling the truth, which caused him a little bit of a problem. But the long and short of it is, I had a statement from the Crown Prosecution Service saying, there is no case to answer. A few weeks later, I had a call again from the police saying because the Crown Prosecution Service couldn't find a case to answer, they needed to consider whether there are any internal matters of my suitability to be a police officer. And the fundamental question they wanted to ask is, does this man have integrity? And there was a unanimous agreement that I did, and therefore the internal proceedings needed to come to a close. I stood there on the patio of our back garden after the calls, just shaking my head, and how has this happened? I know. I was there. I am not innocent. And yet I have a declaration that I'm clean. I was pondering this actually, knowing that I was going to be talking today on this, and been pondering about some of the things overnight. And the Chief Officer of Internal Investigations in North Wales Police said to me, when this all came out back in that November when I sent the letter, he said, this will have to go all the way to the Crown Prosecution Service for them to consider. We have to do that. You know that. I said, yeah. And he said, I don't know how it's going to resolve. You know that, don't you? I said, yeah. This may end up badly for you. You know that, don't you? Yes. He said, but we have to go all the way because if there is no case to answer, we need to be clear ourselves as the police, and the Crown Prosecution Service needs to be clear, and you need to be clear that there is no way this can come back. And I thank God for the wisdom of that situation, the wisdom of that statement. One of my favourite films is The Shawshank Redemption, along with many people, and I don't want to spoil it for anyone, but I think it's Andy Dufresne basically breaks out of prison. And there's a wonderful statement at the end that the character, played by Morgan Freeman, he's called Red, says, and he says that Andy Dufresne crawled through, I think it was 100 metres or 200 metres of sewage, and he came out clean the other side. And I see that same story in my own life. And I would wonder, how could that be if it hadn't been written 2,000 years previously for each one of us who would accept it? And that's been a bit of a shift for my life, to see God's hand and redemption of my sin. Me, I own that, but it's been taken from me, and I own it no more.
So now, having come through all of that, obviously it's changed your life.
Yeah.
And you talk about being clean.
Yeah.
How clean do you feel?
I'm spotless. That situation is a microcosm of the Christian walk. It's not, of course it's an isolated story, but it's the same with every aspect. You only have to speak to my wife and children to see that I am not innocent, but I'm clean. I've spent much of my life rolling up my sleeves and getting stuck into some pretty grotty stuff and coming home like I feel like I need a wash. But God says I'm clean. So yeah, I'm clean. And that's an absolute miracle. And it makes no objective human sense unless you look through the lens of Jesus.
So Jesus says, "My peace I give to you." You said when you were at the letterbox and you dropped the letter, that suddenly you felt
Yeah.
that the battle wasn't going on.
Yeah.
And you live with that peace
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. Yeah. It's sometimes a bit rocky. It sometimes takes a process. The same process, actually, that took place at that letterbox, that post box. The process hasn't changed. I'm not a fan of cheesy church wall paintings and flags. But there's one that I think is true, and it's let go and let God. I'm not a fan. But yet, there is a truth there that is so liberating, that actually the way to peace is to let go of your strivings for peace. And with that comes a joy of knowing that there is someone with a capital S who is in charge. And he's all right. He's really all right. I'd like to recommend him. And yeah, letting go is not bad news. It's not bad news, and it will feel like bad news. It felt like bad news for 15 minutes plus years. But you know that it's really good news when you let go. It's so much better news than you realise. And the way of peace lies that way. So, yeah, of course it's rocky. But every moment I'm back at the letterbox, I'm letting go. And I keep letting go.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's really good.
It's exciting.